do his thing. I was just going to say hi and welcome to another episode of To Thine Own Self Be True, and the I Am That I Am series. My name is Brenda Thyne, and I am with Errol Lawrence today, who was given, I was given his name by a very dear friend of mine, Diane Hill, and Diane's name keeps coming up on these on these videos. So I'm going to have to get Diane on one of these videos at some point. But she speaks very highly of Errol, and I know I've come across. I've been in his path on a couple of different business experiences that have resulted in some incredible referrals and recommendations about Errol's work and who he is. So I thought I'd like to get to know this guy a little bit. Let's hear his story, because I know that it isn't easy to stay true to thine own self, and especially in this time, right? This day and age. And so I wanted to introduce people who have done that in spite of, and to spite the odds and the obstacles. So welcome, Errol Lawrence.
Well, thank you. So where would you like to start?
Well, tell me, have you always done this work? What is it you do exactly? I know you do healing work and some sort of reading or some sort of energy work for people. Can you elaborate a little bit for us?
Well, I would say that on a full-time basis, it's been probably since, I would say more or less 2004 or 5, I began to really do this on a more full-time basis. And previous to that, my first introduction to doing healing began when I was just a small child. But before we get to that, my name is Errol Lawrence. I'm a member of the Kissi-Keweenaw First Nation, located in Manitoba, about a little more than an hour's drive north of Brandon, Manitoba. It is the people speak the Saulteaux language, and over the last little while, as they sort of redraw boundaries and stuff, it's just sort of been imprinted with them just sort of bringing us into the Ojibwe language. But nevertheless, we still consider ourselves to be Saulteaux, and there is a very distinct language. I myself am not a language speaker, because I grew up most of my life in the city of Toronto. So my first sort of introduction into healing began, I would say I was probably about 6 years old, and was a little troubled by my mother returning home doubled over in pain. And she was working for a company, and they had, cement floors. And so, it's very difficult on people who have to spend all day in that environment. So what I was able to do was just say, hey, why don't you just sort of turn your back towards me and just let me put my hands on your back. And I don't think she really thought much of it, but within a short period of time, all the pain had disappeared. So that was the very first sort of introduction to doing healing. We lived in a kind of unique situation that my father was studying orthopedics at the time, and she realized that sort of brought him into a sort of narrow-minded type of focus. So we didn't really say anything to him. My mother understood it, because there were people on the reserve who did this kind of thing, and she was accustomed to leaving an open mind for people like myself to exist. So that being said, I was fortunate enough to have, a steady flow of people that did sort of come and seek hands-on type of healing, knee injuries, migraines, sore shoulders, neck, back injuries, nothing that I took very seriously. And it was just something that I realized I can do. And I had just made some assumptions that I'm sure everybody knows how to do this. Well, as you grow up, you find out that's not necessarily the case. So I had been doing this, sort of on, off. And I guess what really sort of gave me the kick in the behind that I needed was, when I first had run into, who's been my wife of the last 31 years, is her and I were supposed to go on a date, and she threw her back out, and I thought, well, this isn't going to work out good for me. So maybe if I could just get you to trust me for a few minutes here. And I'll get you to lay out flat and I'm going to do something here and we'll just see where this goes. So I asked her to just to suspend everything that you know. And within a short period of time, back was all fixed. She was amazed and just, oh my God, this is incredible. And then the rest was an easy sell after that. So, here we are. But all throughout that time, she had seen me perform some healings on people. And then as my career began to wind down in finance in I'm going to say probably the early 2000s, really, after the sort of 9/11 event, there was a lot of problems in the stock market and things of that nature. So things began to wind down. She began to, say, listen, we need to change the direction of everything. So we moved from the city to Arrole. It's about 90 minutes north of the city. And it literally began the same week we arrived. So we had a neighbor, so I'm looking right down into his driveway, actually. Their son, who was a teenager at the time, came to me and he asked if I would happen to know of anybody, and well, specifically myself. He said, you're native, you know how to heal people. And I thought, well, that's an interesting thing to say to somebody. But anyway, I said, well, what's the problem? And he said, well, the person right next door to us, or the family next door, there's a tragedy, something happened here, and the woman is badly injured. And so he said, is it a possibility that maybe you know how to do something? And I thought, all right. Maybe we'll have a look at this. And she had made her way over to the house with great difficulty, and she had what amounted to almost paralysis in half of the body. So then I decided, oh, okay, I better do this. So I went out and bought a massage table, had her come back, and then I put her up on the table. So about, I would say 10 sessions later, I see her rollerblading past my window. So I'm assuming must be doing all right if you could rollerblade. And really, that kicked the whole thing into gear. And I don't think I was really, contemplating that I should be doing this as a full-time sort of occupation. However, it just seemed that this needed to prove to me what kind of capabilities, I actually had, and that this is something that I should be exploring. So I just said, okay, I'll trust the process. And within a very short period of time, there were some indications of, other people wanting, my attention. So I said, okay, fine. And then that just exploded. And then I came home one day and somebody had left a series of phone numbers for me. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I should call some of these people that they're suggesting. Turns out that these were native run health centers. So I had called a few of these health centers, and the next day I was working in one, the next day another one after that. So that began more or less the type of career that I have been, sort of stepping into. Now it became more formal because I was working in these health centers, and I would leave time sort of towards the end of the week and maybe part of the weekend to see people on an individual basis. So the healing began to really change. It began as a hands-on type of healing, but it quickly began to move into an entirely different area. It began to shift in ways I don't think I really could have ever predicted the direction that this thing was about to go. So it began to shift very quickly into places where, you access parts of the person. So by teaching the person how to create focus, began to bring the heart online. And then eventually we went further, said, well, if we're going to go into the heart, there must be other aspects. And then that began connection to the bigger spirit, and then that began connection to your system of innate. It began building bridges inside of the body. It began to bring in more sophisticated systems of body with teaching the people then how to resolve everything from from traumas to things that are happening in the mind, your thoughts, feelings, the emotional body, even the cells of your body. It began to branch out into other sophisticated areas, including some accessing of DNA, bringing things online that had become shut down for whatever reason. So, no, you think that was the end of it. Then, a gentleman showed up at my door one day, and he had said that, he was a healer, and that he was instructed to go find me, but he said I didn't have anywhere to look. I had no idea what I was supposed to do, who I was looking for, where this person could be located. So he apparently just showed up to a spiritual shop in Arrole, and he started to describe to the lady behind the desk that I am looking for somebody who has this really incredible ability to do and she goes, I know exactly who you're talking about. So he pulls up in front of the house on his motorcycle, a real nice one too, and knocks on the door and introduces himself. And I said, well, okay, fine, step in. And he had some physical issues that were going on with himself, and he worked quite a few years ahead of me. So we did a session, and it expanded into areas that I had never anticipated. So through him, he started sending me people. Well, these people weren't ordinary people. These were people that were connected to things that I shouldn't know about. So it connected me to people who had, access to training, and that training was very specific, and it was and it was designed by a foreign military. These people were of exceptional talent. I have never met people like this before. So when I started to do the healings on them, I started to realize, no, we're into something I have never even thought about before. So and then, it began the first introduction to things that are not within our realm. These were, connections to things that you would call otherworldly. It began to also step into some other areas. So one day that gentleman had come back, and he had a session with me, and he was about to leave. And I spoke to the person that was coming in right behind them. And they spoke about a type of problem that was more spiritual, very, dark, kind of demonic. And I said, you shouldn't go. Maybe you should give me an idea of what this is actually about, because he had actually a book that spoke about really sort of concepts that even to this day are somewhat difficult to synthesize. He got into things of beings that exist in light and those in dark. Well, that was the most incredible thing, because as that person had sat down and there was issue with something being attached to them, he was able to actually take that situation and skillfully dismantle that without any conflict, without anything taking place. So, he said, listen, you need to change what you're doing. You need to advance into these areas, because you're demonstrating a skill set. And with that skill set, it's time to apply this principle as well, that has to deal with things of a dark nature. But he said, it's not even going to be just there. It's going to be things of a nature of light as well, because he said, you have to understand that there are things going on here. So I'm going to explain some rules to you, and this is what you're going to do. And then that again, opens up more doorways, and opens up, the opportunity to have people seek a healing. And those particular people that were coming in, they had very complex situations, post-traumatic stress. There were issues of attachments, and we began to realize that some of these attachments weren't just dark; many of them were light as well, but all doing the same thing, feeding from the human being. And this he explained, there's no permission for this to occur, and so this needs to be given to you as a sort of roadmap as how you can deal with these situations. So the healing has really evolved. So today I rarely ever put my hands on anybody. It just appears to be something that's not necessarily needed. And I think that what we have been able to do is develop a practice of being able to be very thorough as far as finding solutions to things that were incredibly difficult to even imagine some time ago. Now I'm getting some stuff here, messages telling me my video has gone down for whatever reason. So does it surprise you? All right, well, we'll look at the beach. How's that?
It's beautiful. Carry on, please. Don't let that deter you. We know. I wrapped this in light so they won't get to disconnect us like they did my last call. But
okay. So in the situations that we have found ourselves in, it began to, the work began to become very thorough. It began to, evolve to do things that I never had anticipated could have been wrapped into the idea of healing. So from that, I guess, it really has become, a practice where by this point, I would say I have probably performed more than 18,000 healings. I have very extensive background in terms of dealing with disease, dealing with attachments, dealing with people who haven't been able to heal from trauma, pain, suffering, things of the past. And it's been able to become very much wrapped into finding truthful solutions for people, meaning things that maybe have started out to only be an effect of the mind, begin to track those things through their system. In other words, this problem of the mind also has an effect in your thoughts, feelings, your emotional body, has these effects moving through your entire system, teaching the people to access all of this and to bring it through to a full resolution. I do not advertise. I have, the work with the First Nations Healing Centers. It's, it is keeping me very busy, but as well, the individual sessions that I do with people have been conducted this way all over the world. And so as a result of that, I've really been fortunate in that I have not been had to go the route of advertising and hosting of websites and all these kinds of things. And it's really taken on a life of its own. And again, I had no idea that something like this would come my way, and then lo and behold, you're contacting me, and here we are having this conversation. So that's me. Let's evolve this conversation. Which questions do you have?
Well, I want to say thank you for the work you do, Errol, because especially with the First Nations, I'm very blessed to have been included in some wonderful healing center or healing retreat rather experiences and ceremonies. And I have some very dear friends that are very close to my heart who I've met in the last few years. I had a teacher many years back. So I'm very partial to the First Nations, an incredible trauma that they have undergone and are still continuing to heal from that. And so any work that's done, especially in those areas, is absolutely, necessary. And I got to say, like some of the stories I've heard, break my heart. Like they're just unbelievable. Incredible, and perseverance. The fact that these people continue to, who've been through these traumas and things like that, and not just First Nations. Like there's a lot of people. I think our entire world has been traumatized in a number of ways, and I feel that with with all that's coming out as we speak right now and throughout the next few months, especially anyway, on this planet specifically, you're going to have PTSD everywhere. And excuse me, I forgot to turn my switch off on Spirit there. And usually they don't interrupt. But anyway, if I start yawning, that's what's going on, by the way. I'm not bored or tired or needing a nap of any kind. I maybe could use a coffee, but still. So forgive me on that. But and that anybody who knows me knows that's if she starts yawning, it's Spirit. It's not her, because it's not, unless it's like 11:30 at night, whatever. Anywho, but so working with the First Nations and stuff, and then of course everybody else's trauma is going to be really amplified, right? This mass psychosis that everybody's going through right now. Let's talk a little bit about that. And, I was going to title this one Hiding in Plain Sight when we spoke the other day, because there you are, and if people don't know to look for you, you're like right there, you're just like right there. I know you're fairly local. I could drive to see you. And I'm like, holy crap, he's like right there. I thought you were like, a couple hours away, but nope, not even. And so we like to bring people out to the open for people to know, because there you are, hiding in plain sight. And while you maybe don't have a lot of openings, we like to offer, people to get the chance to get to know who you are and find out if, they can get us slide into one of those appointments that you do have open. So tell us a little bit about what you think is happening right now. What do you see happening to people, and are some of the current experiences you're having in relation to healings of people and whatnot, are they related to now, or is it mostly stuff you see from before?
They're all related to right now, and this particular time zone appears to be this is the place where all things are going to happen. And so one of the things that we should become aware of is that we have been subjected to, I'm going to say, an assault upon the senses of ourselves. So there's been really, I guess you'd say, a very deliberate effort put forward to disconnect all knowledge from everybody. And as a result of that, people aren't able to truly heal in the way that they should be. And so when we speak about this, we get into, some of these other areas, and so let's just let this one go then. So when we are looking at this time zone that we're in, part of the problem that we have is the misunderstanding that has infiltrated our civilization, and that is that the people aren't understanding the most basic elements of things. And so if we, when I start off with people and I hear what they're describing to me and what they're stuck in and what they can't seem to resolve, I have to bring them back and say, listen, let's just change how you view things and how you see yourself. Let's start operating from a different platform of awareness. So let's start off with something that sounds like this. You are and only ever will be your spirit. You are never going to be a solid object. I know what it looks like in the mirror. But if you can just let that go for a moment, then you will recognize a spirit doesn't have any arms, it doesn't have any legs, and in fact, it doesn't even have a voice. So what are you actually doing? And so we get them to, let's change some of the language up here. Your body. So let's say it's 50 trillion cells. Why don't we just change that last word and we'll call it antennas. And if we do that, then you'll be able to see this a lot easier. If there are antennas, then that must mean that they are a receiver. Well, if they're going to be a receiver, then they must be a sender as well. So what are you receiving and what are you sending? Well, spirit operates, from my viewing point, from two very critical pieces. And one is information and the other is experience. So The body then is the receiver of information and experience synthesized through these 50 trillion cells. And as an action is taken, you move an arm or you stand or you sit, the experience of that is then radioed back to spirit to let you know, you moved an arm, you moved a leg, you stood, you sat. This is what you're doing. And so if you can see the back and the forth here, then you can begin to sort of expand it out. Well, your spirit is more like a sine wave. And so if it's a sine wave, it's a sine wave of consciousness. It has no real beginning or end, but you're somewhere on this entire sine wave. So where's the information coming from? Well, let's expand that out a little bit. You are, as a spirit, playing host to a multitude of lifetimes. For the average person, it's probably on the small side, close to 800, and on the high side, maybe a little over 1,000. They're held as bodies in all different time zones, both past you, which is now, and future. If you just take the clock on the wall and chuck that out the window, then you'll recognize that all of those lifetimes are now, and they're simultaneous, and all that information is needed. How are you going to know to stand, to sit, to move an arm or a leg? How are you going to know this? How are you going to know what to feel, when you should feel those things, and how to interpret emotional content? It's coming from information that's flowing to you. And it's coming through all of these various lifetimes that you have been trained not to tune into or know that they exist. So let's use your logic. If you have all of these bodies in the past and future, then you must have mother, father, ancestors attached. And so if we want to understand it, then we should look at it something like this. Thousands of times per second, information flows down the ancestor lines, hits your lifetimes past and future, and where the information crosses, that's you. You are the high point of focus for all of the information traveling from those ancestors to the lifetimes past, future, and crossing at you. This information is what's radioed to the body, synthesized as the next action, next action, next action. The issue here then comes, what happens when your ancestors were brought to a war and on their deathbed never had a chance to resolve this? And that war is actually right now. And then in this lifetime over here, they were tortured or beaten, or there was rape, and there was all manner of different things. And then there's, say, addiction. So if you have, say, a European lineage, it's quite conceivable, since they've been fermenting for some 7,000 odd years, that some family lineages could be broadcasting to you all of the energy of the addiction to alcohol, because they're currently all doing this. And so does it surprise you that you're an alcoholic? Because it shouldn't. And then if you can understand that, suddenly you realize, hey, wait a minute, are you saying that I am the receiver of corrupted information? Yeah, you're the receiver of corrupted information, which then influences what you broadcast to the body, that then takes the next action. Gets a little stranger from there, because when there is a trauma, and these traumas are deliberate, by the way. So these traumas are also inflicted not only upon the ancestors, but inflicted upon yourself and other lifetimes past and future. And what would be the purpose of this? Whenever there is a trauma, spirit energy seems to do something rather unique. A small piece of that energy is split off. And that split off piece does not have the light of that spirit. And so you call that your shadow. That shadow then could find itself magnetized to you, providing you with constant influence. Hey, I need another drink. So when you talk to people who are in these heavy addictions, I often ask them, do you hear the voices? What voices? Have another drink for me. oh my God, how did you even know? I thought I was crazy. No, because those shadows then create magnetic attraction. They can pull shadows from the ancestor lines from lifetimes past and future that may be engaging in alcohol consumption at a dangerous level. And so what happens is all of a sudden the individual is inundated with shadows. And these shadows, you cannot dismiss their intelligence because ultimately they are still spirit. And so even though they can't seem to reattach themselves to the spirit, you now get to understand that over time, they're going to figure out how to hijack your mind, how to hijack your thoughts, how to hijack your feelings. They're going to learn to hijack your emotional body and trigger you and trigger you and trigger you. Why? I need another drink. So I wanted you to be in a state of anger, bitterness, frustration, rage, hatred, whatever it needs to be. So now the shadows then can infiltrate the system because they are still spirit energy, which means you can't really turn your back on them. So teaching the people then how to access the system, be able to call the shadows forward and resolve them. Then go into the mind and look at the patterns that got created. So remember, you are a spirit, and the problem is this. You are constantly birthing things into existence. Well, if you birth something into existence in your mind, you can come back a million years from now, still there. It hasn't done anything. Why? Because it's like you. Doesn't have any plans on dying anytime in the next trillion years. So it's there. Now we have to go in there and we have to resolve all the things, the characters, the ones that cross their arms and refuse to participate, the one that talks over everybody in a social gathering, because it's afraid that, it needs to control people and events and situations so nobody gets a chance to have a free-flowing conversation, the one that's angry, frustrated, bitter, the one that's abusive. These are things you created. You created them. Because you're living in a place where they don't explain anything to you. How are you going to know that you birthed these characters? And that these characters will hide in the dark side of the mind, meaning unconscious. And the only reason why it's unconscious is because you never brought any light in there. So teaching the people to cross the barrier, walk in as a spirit, and bring light into the area and learn how to resolve the beings that you created. And for many people, they're not aware of it, but all you have to do is ask the people around them. Give me the person's characteristics, and they're going to tell you, you do this, this, this. What are you dealing with? Those are either shadows or those are the characters that you gave birth to that are literally playing you, and you are unaware of this. So to become aware means that you can go to these places as full awareness and you can resolve all of this stuff. And, the thing that people really, truly need to understand in all of this process is this. Healing is far simpler than you know, because at some lifetime, all experiences, good, bad, and ugly, must be resolved to unconditional love. And what does that do? It puts everything back to the bigger spirit, almost like a giant database, for it to be archived for your use at any time you need it. Is by creating frequency match within yourself by way of you asking yourself a question. It's that simple. So, to really resolve the problems in a being is to understand that it's infiltration from within. You have been infiltrated. Once you begin to clean up that mess, and from here, you can also, with permission, and the reason for it is as a spirit, how you actually operate. Well, you operate by contract and agreement for everything you do. So are these shadows contracted with you? No. They're just there doing what they do. And if you understood some of the rules, well, apparently they don't have the right to do that. There's your leg up on everything. So as the spirit, you suddenly realize, hey, wait a second here, you're violating all my free will and choices. And as a result of that, I hereby revoke all of your agreements. Why? Because I am the I am. I am the master intelligence, and I have just revoked all your agreements. So here's how the game is going to go. You're going home to the bigger spirit to be healed. This is not a debate. This is exactly what's going to occur. And you're going to find out that your system will be most cooperative because it has been subjected to this nonsense for thousands upon thousands of years across a continuum. And so most people are simply playing out history and the history of that of their ancestors. And then there are spiritual games. Those spiritual games are particularly difficult to see. And those spiritual games involved geometry. And so most people don't know about these things. So a lot of people, and I'm going to say it's almost all, if you went into the dark part of your mind, you're going to understand how this entrapment works. Most are playing a pyramid game. But see, darkness doesn't play you in that light. What does it do? It inverts the pyramid. And now you're playing with an upside down triangle. And here's the game that most people are trapped in. Victim, perpetrator, fixer. And if you knew that you're playing these characters, this geometry spins and it traps spirit energy, locking you into a game that you've probably been playing for the last couple thousand years without even knowing it's happening. The shadows were attracted to those games. The bad habits are attracted to those games. The spiritual energy cannot remove itself because it doesn't have the conscious awareness. So teaching the people how to resolve all of this stuff brings the being back to a state of calm and balance. It allows for the spirit to then access other areas of body, access your blueprints, mind, thoughts, feelings, the emotional body, the cells of the body, all the other subtle bodies, clean all that nonsense out, and go in and look for the spiritual games. Because in the as above, meaning your higher spirit, there's a soul below, and you're playing a game here. And you're not understanding that some of these are of a higher spiritual nature. So one of the most classic games that I see all the time that are destroying people's lives would be issues of trust, issues of abandonment, and issues of betrayal, which then play out where? In everybody's life, in every family system, in every relationship. This is what we're up against. And so when you have a roadmap to all of this, I tell the people, you don't need to understand any of this. Your job is just to do your work. So I'm going to show you how to do it. And when you're done, you're going to get back to the basic principles. The basic principle is this. You are here to create in matter. So get back to the business of doing business. And then they're like, well, what about all the darkness? Well, in case you haven't noticed, that darkness cannot do anything in matter. They cannot create. So evil has gotten all of us to build all of its empires, build its armies, fight in its wars, build its banks and corporations, and say that you're impoverished. The moment you face that and resolve that darkness, you could look across the table from it and say, well, guess what? You don't have the ability to create anything. I will not supply my energy to you. That's called checkmate. So the rest of you, you can just go now. And they're not going to challenge you because they understand that with the resolution in all areas of your own darkness, addiction, pain, suffering, all of a sudden you'll begin to recognize they have nowhere to play. Game's over. And so you have then asserted your sovereignty over your beingness. And you're no longer the tool of darkness, which means that you can spend your time creating. How about creating some joy, happiness, laughter? Be creative. You know, plan a holiday and make it show up. those types of things. You are here to create. But the problem is everybody's being led to believe that they have to lend their energy to in a system that has inverted everything and then subverted everything. You know, what have they subverted? Culture, language, traditions, family, community, society, and culture, all subverted. So many people, well, I got to run to my culture. Well, if you stood back for a moment, you can see that your culture has been subverted and that the things that they're propagating are really not in your best interest. And not to say that culture isn't going to give us, you know, beauty and art and color and some magic, but you got to understand they needed to take our power. And in order to do that, they needed to infiltrate everything, every system, everything that is organized, everything that has to do with you, so that you can be used as a tool to create every evil empire that has ever existed. So if you don't like what COVID looked like, sorry, you made it happen. That's the ugly truth. You made it happen. Why? Because you lent your energy to this distorted media and its propaganda machine, because I can't think of the last decade when the media actually told the truth. They're incapable of it. They're simply a wing of propaganda. So they're just simply programming you into messaging so that you can do its bidding. When you start to begin to understand all of this stuff, you resolve the things within yourself, you withdraw your energy from these systems, and these systems die. Because evil cannot create without you. That's the power you have. And once you understand your position of power, well, then you can flip the whole system on them and dare them. Now, what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. Yeah, nothing. That's what you're going to do.
You're not going to feed it. That's absolutely phenomenal. Yeah, now I totally understand why why Diane said, you got to talk to my friend Errol. Because I have just been telling her all this very same stuff for quite a while as well. And I'm sure you right there, she's probably got an echo going on. As we've been trying to teach everybody, this is what's happened. You know, this is where we are. We've been hijacked all along, you know, and everything you just said, I absolutely love. And I'm totally there with you on that. I do, you know, I know we're going to, you know, overcome this subversion, inversion, polar duality crap. And I know it's coming soon because that is the plan, right? Is the plan. You know, you spoke of the, I mean, you said a whole bunch of stuff that was fabulous. One of the things you talked about was, you know, trust, you know, and I've said for a long time that trust is one of the things that, as I've worked with people for a number of years myself, that's the one, that and self-worth hand in hand are probably two of the most prevalent issues we all seem to be facing in one way or another, in some degree or at some level. And it's because that's part of the program to make us not trust the right people like ourselves and our creator and creation and nature, and instead trust the wrong things. And therefore, you know, the government comes in and governs your mind because why? Because you trust that when they've taught you that everything else is wrong, it's not good, it's all bad, yada, 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 the whole bit, everything. I totally relate to everything you said. And you know, it's interesting because I've been following and learning about commerce law, and commerce law is that like one kind of level beyond common law, which takes you into where we are, this whole merchant law, you know, really, this is all enterprise. This is all, you know, business. This is all commodity, chattel, all of that stuff. It's all very important. And these are the systems you're speaking of that they were infiltrated. Our financial system, even our identity, our language has been, you know, perverted, distorted. And I often say, you know, bastardized in a lot of ways. So because we were taught that that's not right. Television is a perfect example. Television, right? They're telling you you're programmed on it. Well, don't bother me. I'm watching my program. You darn tootin' you are. And, you know, you're doing it regularly, faithfully. You're feeding that machine. You know, a lot of stuff's come to light over the last couple of years. The Canadian military admitted to using propaganda since April 2020 on the Canadian people. When the hell did we ever think that that would happen to us here unsuspecting? It's all come out. 33 million Americans, Canadians have been spied on. by Trudeau, to find out what's going on our mobile phones and things like that. So this kind of stuff, but these are all levels and systems that have been perfectly penetrated, and government, you name it, the whole thing. So all of this stuff is absolutely what I wanted to talk about with you. And you were very eloquent and very articulate in your speaking, because you covered a lot of stuff in a short amount of time. So in the commerce law, what brought me to that thought was tacit agreements. Well, you didn't really say no, and if you didn't express an absolute no, then kind of, we're going to sneak you into this agreement anyway. You didn't say you weren't going to be a part of it. So in sort of some sort of a reversal of a approval or permission, they enter you into this, and we got trapped into and I think that's that whole bamboozle, that whole scam stuff has been perpetrated on humanity for a very, very long time.
But you do have a way out from this as well, and that is the understanding of sovereignty. So if we change the definition of that and say, well, what is spiritual sovereignty? That would mean that you are responsible for all energy that you brought to planet Earth. So where did you give it away? Well, if we were to look at it honestly, we would say that within our solar system, there really isn't 10 planets. There's more like 66. And if you want to know what's behind it, add one more 6 and you'll see the system. So what would it look like? Blame, shame, guilt, judgment, jealousy, envy, bitterness, frustration, rage, hatred, fury, not good enough, won't have enough, won't be enough, not worthy, whole, complete, must struggle and strive. Okay, there's 66 of this nonsense, okay? So when you begin to understand that, you're still the spirit, and spirit works by contract and agreement. And then the worst parts of it is called fine print. So what would you do? Well, you as a spirit, in the work that you're going to do, will be asked that you and all of your ancestors attached to all of your lifetimes, past, present, and future, with full permission, will be asked in this moment, would you agree to cut the cords to all the institutions of Earth, including cutting the cords to, every lifetime of existence, to every governmental system, all passports, driver's license, birth certificates, and all forms of government issued ID, to every church-based institution, especially every banking institution where you have been bought, sold, and traded as cattle, chattel, and put into forms of, debt for service type relationships. All of these institutions going all the way through military, education, higher education, pharmaceutical, all of it, every institution of Earth, cutting the cords to these institutions. You have then severed your relationship to all of it. You don't have to go out and do a formal declaration. You are the spirit. Cut the cords to these institutions, send back their energy, receive back every ounce of energy ever harvested from you in every timeline, time stream of your existence, bringing it back to yourself and burn all contracts, agreements, and fine print. All of a sudden, you're outside of the system. There's nothing they can do about it. This is what brings your energy back to self, because your energy is trapped in every one of these institutions of Earth. So all of a sudden, you throw them a massive curveball, because if I'm going to heal you, why am I going to waste my time with you when I can say, why don't we just heal you, all lifetimes and all ancestors attached to those lifetimes, past, present, and future? I would rather heal 1 billion people at once than one person, because it's a waste of time. Now, all of a sudden, now we're back in the game, because all of a sudden you remove an entire lineage across many time streams. All of a sudden you deal them a massive blow. Now let's take it another step further. Well, let's fix commerce. Time to talk to your spirit, bigger spirit. Life down here sucks, and I would like you to now enter into spiritual contracts to conduct commerce upon the earth with you and planet Earth. So create these new contracts, because we don't have any contracts to create commerce. So let's make it happen. And all of a sudden, you'll begin to see that things can change around you. Why? Because you create a brand new system. You still use the tools that are put in front of you. You still have to go to the bank. You still have to go to a grocery store. You still have to do these things. But the one thing about all of that is that you're not contractually obligated to those institutions draining your energy without your consent, or tacit consent, or unconsent. In other words, they just plain old tricked you. So when you begin to understand it from that perspective, you begin to flip the table on them, and you do it from a big scale, and you do it across all the timelines where all of this is occurring, and you deal them a massive defeat, because this is how you're going to gain it all back. Spirit doesn't play from a singular point of focus, plays from all points of focus simultaneous. So darkness, you want to play a game, do you? All right. If you sit down in that chair, I will destroy you. You will not end this game and walk away with enough energy to stand up. Why? Because I know what you've been up to. Mm-hmm. And so now what I'm going to do to you is I'm going to strip you in every place that you harvest energy from this being that has come to me to seek this healing. And when I get done with you, this person will have their sovereignty returned. You, on the other hand, good luck. But you have nothing, you will take nothing, and bye-bye. Now you're going to leave. Why? Because that's a spirit, and now they're aware of what they are, and they realize how much power they actually can wield. They changed the terms of the agreement so that the bigger spirit enters into a new agreement to conduct commerce upon the earth. So let's say, so my biggest thing with a lot of people was how come all these healers are like living in poverty and misery? Well, change the dynamic, heal, and then change your spiritual contracts to conduct commerce upon the planet. And now nobody outside of that is going to be dictating to you what the terms of the agreement for any exchange is going to be. Now I put you in the driver's seat. Now all of a sudden that person could go out and do their work and be absolutely worthy to receive whatever that they are, able to negotiate on their behalf. Everything has been stripped away. So there's no knowledge. So when you bring this back to the people, suddenly that person is empowered, but they're not empowered here. They're empowered across all the lifetimes, past and future, and then all of the ancestor lifetimes. So what do you think happens to that one that's on the battlefield? They take a little journey into the forest and a little left turn, and they're like, yeah, it's nicer over here. It's better than shooting my fellow human, and adios. And all of a sudden they exit the war because they're feeding off the energy of all of those, traumas that are existing here that were inflicted upon everybody, on everybody in every time zone. You have to widen the picture. And when you widen the picture, you solve the problems, not for one, but for 1 billion of your ancestors and your lifetimes, which you are ancestry to yourself anyway. So solve the problem on that scale. And let's see what darkness has to come back with then. Because all of a sudden they're on the run. This is the power that a person has. And if we take it a step further, this is probably not going to, be taken well, but it needs to be spoken about. All these people are insisting on playing this game. Well, folks, you need to look up at the score clock. It says darkness, 216 baskets to your 1. So all of you who keep coming to me and saying that, I'm just going to keep this going in this fight, I am source energy. Well, I have to say to them, you as source energy suck at this game. You suck. You suck so bad, you have a less than 0 chance of winning. So the best thing that you can do as an act of mercy is to tap out from the game. Heal yourself in all of these areas. Refuse to play. And guess what? Game over. Because darkness needs you to build everything for it. So why don't you stop playing the game? Why don't you just heal yourself? And then with your connection to that source energy through your bigger spirit, to you, the I am, towards your body, you are going to play this completely differently, where that source energy, your spirit, can move you differently around the board. It can bring to you who are, say, in this field, people to heal. Well, here's the beauty. We haven't a clue who that person is. We have no idea who that person is going to interact with. We have no idea. But all of a sudden you perform a healing, you think, it looks like everything else. Adios, they go out the door. But then suddenly they're engaging in things that they maybe never would have done until the healing was taking place. And then that causes a disruption in a political system, in a schooling institution, in a, a union or whatever it is, because we don't know who these people are. Our job is to start healing self without a game, and then see where that moves you around the board. Why? Because this is how you're going to beat darkness, because darkness must game on you. If you tap out from this game, because you're not going to win anyway, you've lost every round. Pitiful. That's what it looks like from my perspective through all of these healings. I'm not just telling you this to anger people. I'm simply telling you, y'all lost. Just tap out. You cannot be evil because you refuse to acknowledge that it is allowed to lie, cheat, and steal, torture, maim, and kill. If you're not prepared to play under those rules, tap out. And most people aren't. Why? Because they're decent beings. They don't want to play in that realm. So stop playing. You're the problem. Get out of the game, heal yourself, and watch what happens. Now, all of a sudden, you're moving around the board in a different way, and you're causing things to occur, even if you don't have, a complex type of life, because you have no idea. You could be standing at that bus stop. Somebody there was contemplating suicide. You never even looked in their direction, but because your energy is completely different, they will no longer do this. And they may go on to actually do something interesting. And yet you haven't a clue. That's how you play the game. That's how you change everything. Because now all of a sudden the source energy and your spirit are moving you in a different way. And the darkness doesn't have an answer for this. Now, all right, darkness, what's your next move? Oh, you want to throw a rock at me? Okay, well, I'll just move. And what's your next move? Well, I'm going to throw a rock at you. Okay. And what's your next move? I'm going to throw a rock at you. All right. Anything else? No, I'm going to throw a rock at you. Why? Because they can't create in matter. They need you to build everything for them. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm lazy. I'd rather be surfing. So if you want me to go and build that, you'd be waiting a while. So we need to change the perspective on things. If the people tap out from this game and there is no game to play, the darkness can't build anything.
No. Well put. Well put. And they have given us the playbook. A lot of people believe that the 1611 King James Version of the Bible is pretty good, playbook that they've been working with, and that there's a lot of, misinformation in there, but there's also a lot of really powerful coded messages and codings in there that can liberate us from this matrix. What you're speaking of specifically is taking care of business, of course, in the astral realms, right? In the spiritual realms, taking back our spiritual authority, which is our sovereignty, and recognizing that we are sovereign beings. We are here technically as creator beings, and as made in the image or somewhat like it, apparently. And so we'll see about that. But, this is really interesting because this spiritual authority, this sovereignty, that's a lot of what I preach to people. And, because right now, this is everything. What we don't recognize is that we have the power because they've taught us we didn't. Oh, excuse me. My peeps are going to be laughing at that one. Okay, pardon me. I'm sorry, Errol. That's the spirit. Wanting to get in on this conversation. And, you actually, I have to say that when I'm engaging, it's funny because I usually invite people. I usually put the link out and invite people to come on for today. I've had two of these calls and these interviews, and both times Spirit was very active, and it was interesting because I didn't have an audience. We don't have anybody watching, just you and I chatting. And I know everybody's going to love this when they do get to watch it, and they might be a little upset that they didn't get to chat with us because they'll be asking all these questions. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know that again, I'm not bored or tired. I don't need a nap. I just got Spirit calling into the show, literally. But I will say this. It's interesting. You're talking in a sense too about soul retrieval, fragment calling back, a whole different kind of collection of stuff there, really. But it's all about the empowerment of the person, right? Excuse me, getting it together and holding true to the sovereignty and to themselves, right? To be the whole totality of who they really are meant to be, right? Not just a part of or inflicted, with or afflicted with or any of that stuff. So I really like what you're talking about there in that way. And I have to say that, again, it all comes back to the trusting part. We have to learn to trust ourselves and our abilities. And when we do wake up and realize who we are and what we're all about, even at that, we don't necessarily have we don't grasp the concept of like the absolute scope of it all, and really we are, as you know, we are incredibly magnificent beings. And the fact of the matter is we are a divine force that channels divine force and is actually able to help be that transmitter, receiver, stuff like that, to help other people be in that space of receiving healing and stuff like that. So I really do appreciate where you're at with this. And I know that you're going to be, I'm glad to have got some time with you because I don't feel like you're going to get much time in the near future. I'm going the way they do. You see some history repeating itself here, Errol. Coming from the First Nations perspective, I would say that there's some repetition going on. Would you not agree?
Well, I had warned in some of my previous engagements at particular First Nations where I'm called to sometimes speak and give a teaching on something, and I told them, somebody came up and reminded me, said, about 5 years ago, I was sitting in this audience and you said that you have to be careful because your savior is going to show up and they're going to be bearing a needle. So you fast forward 5 years, that's exactly what's taking place. Because when you begin to dig a little bit into it, and I had a mother that went to a residential school and my father something very similar to it, they were used as to experiment on all pharmaceutical. So before polio came out as a vaccine, before there was measles, mumps, rubella to give to people, where do you think they tested it? They tested it on the people who were children at schools. Why? Because there's no need to ask anybody's parents, and we're just going to get away with it. And so when you look at, well, how come there's such a high death rate in all of these residential schools? Well, I told them, I don't have the proof of it, but someday something is going to show you that those children didn't die in the ways that you're being told, that in all likelihood, they died from toxic shock. Similar to, situations where you see people that have things that they call like Gulf War syndrome. Well, as a younger person, it was so obvious to stand there and look at my grandparents and all of their friends, and then look at my parents and my aunts, uncles, and all of their friends, and they were cognitively different on a scale that was so obvious. It was like, my parents, they had like a haze in their eyes. Well, what is this? So obviously something had occurred. Well, then all of a sudden, everybody's a diabetic. Well, that's interesting. How'd that all happen? All of a sudden, we find out that they have all this inflammatory response in the body. Well, what do you think is causing this? Well, it became obvious to me in a very short period of time of working at these health centers that what I was looking at is that these people were poisoned. That simple. Doesn't matter what anybody has to say. When you're doing this work, things come up. And that spirit is going to say some things, and now we have to undo a process. So it became obvious to me that the next step would be that they would repeat this process. They injected those kids in the schools, and then they just did this. And what did they do? They pretty much, subjected all the First Nations to this COVID vaccine. The problem that you have is at the level. So what did they do? They repeated history. Well, I mentioned it. I warned you. If you did it, I don't know what to say to you except that you repeated the history. So what other history will repeat itself? High inflammatory responses in the body, high death rates, on. Doesn't take a genius to tie a few things together because it's very obvious. And so now as the first information is slowly leaking out that, yes, there is a problem with these bodies of these children that had died in these schools, and they're not all for the reason that you're being told. And when you begin to look at that, then, well, the Spirit's already saying what is the cause of these problems. So this next generation is also subjected to all of those effects. And as you're, looking at this process, you go, all right. So if that one is an ancestor and they died of some kind of toxic shock, well, then it means that this one here will also within the same family system have an inflammatory response in the body. How come them old people didn't have inflammatory response in the body until they were old? Because they never lived next to a lake, which is obvious. So, they can tell you whatever story you want. But those who do this work and who do it from the place that I'm looking at, you could say whatever you like. Because after 18,000 plus people, I am your equal whether you like it or not. So my observation point, whether you take it into consideration or not, it's not relevant to me. But I have the information that I require that says absolutely that this is an agenda. And this agenda is old. Okay, it didn't begin yesterday, and it didn't begin 10 years ago. It didn't even begin 50 years ago. This thing is old. And all you're doing is following the repeating patterns of everything all the way through time. And because of the work that I do, it's not just in this individual, it's in the ancestors connected to these types of lifetimes. And all of a sudden you begin to see the repeating patterns. You can't just come to me and say, oh, well, it's natural for people to have these inflammatory responses in the body. Oh, really? Would you like to debate this? Because if you do, I'm going to throw some stuff in your face and it's not going to be kind. So let's just understand something here. I have a viewing point that you don't have. And I have seen the evidence which suggests that this is very deliberate. It is also a repeating pattern, and that it is meant to take away sovereignty. It is meant to destroy lives. Why? You can't leave a highly psychic population out there, because at some point they're going to figure out your game. And when they do, they can wage a holy war against darkness that darkness knows damn well you do not want to anger the First Nations, because I'll tell you right now, we had to do that exact thing on one of the First Nations, and darkness got cornered and stomped out, plain and simple, because they didn't understand what they were up against. They didn't understand how these people can conduct warfare. And I don't think the people sitting in that room knew what they were capable of either. They knew the ideas, they knew the concepts were there, but they didn't know how to tie it all together. And so somebody who can come in and say, well, let's just tie all of this together. And oh, by the way, do you see them? Yeah. Well, I think it's time you just put on the big heavy boots and stomp them out. And that's the end result of it. So this population, as well as a lot of other populations on the earth, are heavily subjugated because they're highly psychic. So you need to suppress this in these populations. And, once you can do that, well, then, you inflict trauma, and then it becomes an epigenetics type scenario where all of the information is running down through the ancestor lines. the people that are living in this time zone are so heavily inundated with pain and suffering that they start to make choices such as to disconnect themselves in the bottom chakras of the body so that they don't feel the pain, so that it never gets synthesized, so that it accumulates, so that it begins to erode DNA, and it begins to slow down frequency within the body, and body begins to, go from living hundreds of years to, you're lucky if the First Nations will see 70. You're lucky. In fact, that population, you'll probably in any community count them on two hands. So this has been a very crafty, systematic annihilation. If you do it fast, they're going to retaliate. But if you do it slow, they'll never see it coming. So the same can now be said about the rest of the world population. And now the rest of you are becoming aware that you are under some kind of assault. You can't put your finger on where it is. Well, I gave you a hint today on where it is. Darkness is gaming on you, and it needs you to build its crappy world. Well, my suggestion is don't bother. And whatever game you think that you have to play, and you have to fight the darkness, let me remind you, you lost every round of cards, okay? And you're not going to win because you're not willing to lie, cheat, steal, murder, maim. You're not willing to do that. And if you're not willing to do that, you're outgunned. So stop playing the game, heal thyself, allow for spirit to move you around in different capacity, and the end result is this. They don't have any way to have influence over you. So what do? You begin to then throw their systems back upon themselves. All that you're creating, we now turn this back on you. And that begins to cause their systems to destroy themselves. And you can do it very quickly because, like I said, why heal one person when you can heal a billion at the same time?
Absolutely. Fascinating, man. Fascinating. Lots of food for thought there, Errol. I gotta tell you, I totally get what I get. I think that's just fabulous. Wow, you got my wheels turning. And I've been on this road for a long time myself, so it's always nice to share information with another and to get their perspective and their perception of things, because it just fits to be just one more facet to the diamond, more beautiful way to see. I mean, it is all one experience, right? We're just having unique perspectives of it all. So incredible.
They want it fragmented so that you believe that you're the only experience.
Yeah.
So then you're alone, isolated, and then subjugated. Well, if you were the whole thing, then you could turn around and say, I don't think you really want to try that. And they're going to go, good idea.
And,
so this is where we make our change.
Absolutely. And meeting them on, on their playing field, I think throws them off when you can meet them there, when you don't, when you let them know, excuse me, knock it off, you guys. When you can let them know that you're hip to the game, that you know exactly what the hell they're up to, and you're not going to play it with them. That's it. That's all. This is where we draw the line. It does offer a completely different experience altogether, and it shifts everything. It's absolutely impossible that it doesn't, right? Because right away you've now disconnected from playing. You have unplugged, and everything else will fall down into the physical realm and the third density here because of those etheric choices and realizations. Wisdom comes from, as you said earlier at the beginning of this call, information and experience. And, that's a powerful place and a perspective to hold for sure. So I appreciate yours truly. And I appreciate all the work you do. I'm grateful that you've stayed true to yourself for all the years you've done it, because it hasn't been easy. This is the time we were called into action for. This is what we're here for. And it's showtime, right? Like we've been doing dress rehearsal for a while and practicing this and doing that. It's showtime. Shit's going down now, and we've got to be on the playing field. We've got to be, because regardless of whether you're awake to it or not, we're on a battlefield here. And regardless of, you know, again, how many players are playing. If you're in a place of awareness, you're going to just do what you need to do and take care of business in that way. So once again, I do appreciate all that you are doing. Errol, we've come up on an hour now, a little bit more than that, and I've taken enough of your time, but I would love to maybe engage again with you and, you know, have a little further conversation about some of those other things that we just briefly touched on, but that are all very relevant and pertinent to this experience, excuse me, right now. So Errol Lawrence, if it's okay with you, I'm going to share your information in the description
Sure.
where people can get hold of you.
It's really just about the about email, because it's not really possible to really handle anything else. And so what we do is just, you know, filter through those, and those that we can help, we just do the best we can. And you know, like I said, you know, maybe, you know, the case where things build up, then maybe the best thing to do is to do it as a group, as a way to sort of say, okay, listen, it's not impossible to do each one of these people individual. Then perhaps maybe, you know, tying something together on a bigger scale is a possibility. In the meantime, those who can, you know, who wish to send an email, just putting in the caption their healing, we'll do our best to try to service you. But just to understand that, you know, I have annual contracts, and these contracts are for a lot of the health centers. I do my best to get to as many people as I can, and for those that I can't get to, it's just the nature of the way things are, and it's, you know, there's nothing I can do about that. So I will try my best to you know, offer things to as many people as possible.
Absolutely. You are only one.
And to those who want a really unique experience, by the way, we're going to be doing on the 16th at a place called Sugar Ridge Retreat, which is, I think it's sugarridge.ca, on the 16th. So it's a day-long session where I teach you to dip into the system, organize the system, and begin to resolve a whole bunch of things on a grand scale. And it's only a single day, and to many of the people that attend, they have attended before, and they're coming back because, hey, I've never had these kinds of experience before. And if they wish to have that experience, I highly recommend it, because and we have scheduled some throughout the entire year this year. And you know, it's near what is it, near well, close to Coldwater area, actually. And it's going to be, next one is on the 16th, and I think it's a Wednesday, if I remember. And all you have to do is just call over to Sugar Ridge Retreat and book to join us on that day. And it's a really, really unique experience. And I tell people, there's no substitute for swinging the axe. So you're doing it. We're not, you know, you get an hour and a bit of this kind of a lecture, but that's it. And it's boots off, and you got to get to work, because there's no other way to give you experience except to do. So my recommendation for people is, you wish to attend something like that, please do. There are quite a few spots left, because people were sort of delaying due to, you know, trying to see what the rules are. I said, whatever, just call, join us, have a wonderful experience. And I'm sure it will be most transformative, because the idea behind it is, I need to turn the power over to you.
Absolutely. And so this is an in-person event.
Yeah.
Is it okay if I advertise this a little bit?
100%.
Okay, I got about, I don't know, probably 72 hours left in Facebook jail, and then I'm out for God knows how long, but we'll give it a whirl and see what we do this time. We've had more incarcerations in the last year. But anyway, and that's all. Again, everything's changing, everything is shifting. Corruption is being exposed all over the place, including that, and Facebook's taken a kicking because of its stupid practices. So, you know, again, karma works, and so does God work in mysterious ways. So I will post this information, and I would love to, you know, connect with you again, and we'll talk about another appointment with you to share some more light, truth, and incredible information and perspective, right? Absolutely.
Yes, we look forward to it, and I'll kind of get somebody to dig into this computer, try to figure out what happened here, because this is the second time this has occurred, and of course, both times being interviewed.
Well, again, they do know when we're doing what we do, and they don't want people identifying anything. God forbid it's light, right?
Indeed.
But I do appreciate your time, as I said, and Errol Lawrence, it was an absolute pleasure meeting you and engaging with you today. To thine own self be true, and you were, so that you became that beautiful I am that you are. And I know you mentioned all of those things, and sovereign as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Brenda, and I look forward to speaking to you again.
God bless you, Errol. Take
Take care.
Bye
Bye.
bye.